Welcome, everyone. My name is Sharon J. I'm with the DOEE, and this is the Building Energy Performance Standard Task Force meeting for June 9th, 2020, starting at 2:30 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website. Welcome, everyone. We hope today is actually going to be a short meeting, only an hour, so we have a short agenda, so we'll go ahead and get started. Let's see. Okay, so I have not muted anybody. So if everybody, I think, is kind of used to these video calls by now and calling in by phone, so if you can kind of control your mute and your unmute on your own, so I don't have to control the background noise. But if you're having issues, we're going to go through a little tour of BlueJeans at the moment to help you kind of find out where all the controls are if you haven't been on BlueJeans before. So I'm going to leave the control up to you, but if there's a certain amount of background noise, I will end up muting you as background noise ends up popping up. For non-task force members, if you'll please use the chat box at this time to go ahead and sign in. That's our sign-in list, so put your name, organization, and email to officially sign in, and I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to do the official roll call out loud for our task force members.
Okay, I think we all know the drill at this point. I'm going to read everyone's name off and just say here, present, yay, whatever works for you. Let's get started. First, Katie Bergveld.
Present.
Patty Boyd.
Present.
Jen Croft.
Here.
Marshall Dewar-Balkin.
Present.
Wendell Felder. Asa Foss. Dave Good.
Present.
Maxwell Greninger.
Present.
Adrian Gross, who had told me he's not going to be here. Rush Mahala.
Present.
Jessica Jones.
Here.
Annika Langino.
Here.
Here.
Devu. Back.
Here.
Sorry, and then Cliff Majerzik. I skipped you by accident.
Here.
There's a really bad echo.
Yeah. All right, I think it's gone. Matt Praske.
Here.
Joe Riley.
Here.
And Jay Wilson.
I'm here.
All right, thank you. And Sharon, we have a quorum.
Is there anyone else that just dialed in by phone and is not on BlueJeans that would like to record their song out loud? Okay, then we will move on. I'm going to give you a quick tour of BlueJeans if you haven't been on BlueJeans before. So if you're familiar with Zoom, where all of the controls are at the bottom of the screen, in BlueJeans, all of the controls are at the top. So at the top middle, the little camera is the control of your video camera. Right next to that is your microphone. So if you are having problems with background noise, or if you are having problems with bandwidth and you need to switch to calling in by phone instead of calling in with your computer audio, you just click that little arrow next to the audio options button and click on that, and it will give you options to dial in by phone, but also still look at the screen and see the presentation. The little screen right next to that is the how to share a presentation, and I should be the only one pushing on that button today, so no one push on that button. The red button is where you hang up and leave the meeting at the end, so don't push that button until the end of the meeting. The controls on the right-hand side, the people chat apps and settings, are how you pull up the control panel on the right-hand side. So the people button will give you a list of everybody that's on the call. The chat button will bring up the chat box so you can see what's going on, and we have a tendency to use our chat box a lot in this meeting, so I'll go ahead and suggest that everybody go ahead and hit the chat box. If you are having problems with audio or background noise, you might try clicking on the settings button. That's where you can control which microphone or speaker is chosen. So you can check some of your settings there. When you're in the chat box, make sure that everyone, the blue everyone is highlighted so that you can chat with everyone. The only other little neat thing in Blue Jeans is in your lower left-hand corner, there is a little slide bar that you should be able to see that's blue that you can slide left and right, and that controls how much of the presentation you see versus the video grid of people's faces. So that's your quick tour of Blue Jeans. If you have any issues while we're going through the meeting today, please chat at me and we'll see if we can't troubleshoot your problems behind the scenes. So the role of the task force, we kind of update and go through this every single time, is to advise the DOEE on the creation of an implementation plan for the Building Energy Performance Program. It's to recommend amendments to proposed regulations issued by DOEE and to recommend complementary programs or policies to the BEPS program. If any topic comes up that needs in-depth discussion, anyone can suggest moving it to a subcommittee, and this is an open meeting. We allow everyone to participate, but because our task force is so large, what we ask is that the non-task force members use the chat box to bring up a topic of discussion, and then we will highlight it or bring it up as part of the discussion and maybe ask you to say it out loud or something like that. So please wait to be called on, but use the chat box pretty heavily because we have a very, very large task force and it's hard to control voice traffic on these video calls. So our overall schedule, we have about 6-ish months left before we set the first round of standards and have our rules out. So we just are going to keep this as a running list on our deck for every meeting, just to kind of keep track of the things that we still have to work on. So for future discussion and feedback, we're still going to be working on a task force report that comes out at the same time as the public comment rules. On the rules, the cost benefit study is still going to be going on, talking about the prescriptive path, and we'll ask for some feedback from the task force on that. We will be coming back to the task force to ask for feedback on guidance documents. We will have some feedback sessions, especially from the hub, the Green Bank, and possibly DCSEU, but possibly some other feedback sessions on programs and policies. And then a new item that we just added talking about disclosure of BEPS data. So these are future agenda items that are not up for necessarily discussion tonight, but just to let you know that these are still on our list of things that we'll be covering over time over the next 5 to 6 months. So today's agenda, we just went through our administrative items. The DOEE is going to present some adjustments that we'd like to make to BEPS for the public health emergency. We want to talk about solar just a little bit. We've had numerous discussions before about it, and we want to bring it up again. We have an update on our campus standard and path, and then we have Annika who's going to talk about something that came up in our Green Building Advisory Council, and then we'll leave a little bit of time at the end for announcements. Is anybody have any other items we might want to add to the agenda? No? Okay, then we will move on. So
This
Katie,
is Todd, actually. Hi.
Okay, Todd.
Sorry, this is Todd. I don't know if today's the right time to have the discussion, but given all that's been going on with the tragedies and the systemic racism that we're reminded of, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity at some point to have a discussion about the potential impact of BEPS on minorities, both potential negative impacts and positive impacts. I don't know if there's been a racial analysis done to sort of understand how the BEPS might impact communities of color. But I just throw it out there that I think it's an important topic, and I would encourage us to discuss it at some point soon.
So maybe co-chairs, we could talk about that on our Friday call. We'll put that, Todd, in the notes. And Does anybody want to discuss that now, or should we add that to the bike rack and then co-chairs, we could talk about that on Friday? What do you guys think?
Yeah. I mean, I think we did, equity came up quite a bit, but we did not, specifically call out impact on communities of color. And I think it's an important one to discuss. So yeah, we can definitely hone in on that and make sure that we're making sure that the positive benefits are there, and that there aren't harmful impacts. I think it's a good point to make sure that we're looking at that in specificity.
Thank you, Todd. Okay. Sounds good. Katie, then I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks, Sharon. We're going to sort of just focus today's meeting a little bit on some of the sort of the topics that we've gotten some stakeholder feedback on, and then sort of what DOE's responses to that stakeholder feedback. And so I just want to put that out there to let you all know that sort of these thoughts that we have are based on feedback that we've gotten from stakeholders that are affected by the implementation of BEPS, or will be owners that are trying to make the upgrades that are required of BEPS. But I want to preface sort of this presentation with that we are also looking for all of your feedback as well. So I'm going to sort of talk through some points both on the COVID side, and then when we talk about solar and the campus carve out. But I want to leave those as open discussions. So as I'm sort of moving through this, if you have questions, you can either interrupt me, or you can wait until I've kind of done talking and we can open it up for discussion. So I just want to put that out there that we are looking for your all's feedback as well on all of these topics. So the first one is sort of our thoughts on our initial steps to assist stakeholders that are facing hardships due to the current public health emergency. And the idea here is that, we certainly recognize and understand that there's going to be a lot of challenges faced by building owners that are, during the public health emergency due to COVID-19. And we really want to help, our community focus on the immediate recovery response, and that we're proactively making some adjustments to the BEPS program, or suggesting some changes to the BEPS program just to sort of help folks during this time, because again, we understand that there's going to be a lot of hardships, and there's going to be sort of rippling effects that may affect building owners for a while, even if the public health emergency for some reason is lifted tomorrow. We know that there would still be rippling effects that people would be facing due to the current crisis. So as our recovery efforts continue, we're going to continue to sort of be a partner. So the things that we're proposing right now, we see as potentially a starting point, depending on how this crisis continues and how it unfolds. So I just want to sort of preface that's sort of where we're coming from with this. And these are sort of, the ways that we're trying to respond to what's going on right now. So if you go to the next slide, Sharon. Or Andrew, I don't know who's driving the slides. So this is sort of the summary of changes that we're going to take right now. The first one being that we are going to offer I also want to give the context that what we're trying to do right now is what we have the authority to do within the law. Because I think that that's going to sort of serve everyone better if we can kind of do what we already have the authority to do now, and be as flexible as possible within our authority that we have currently established. And so the first thing, and this is sort of the biggest takeaway I think that most folks will want to know, is the idea that we're going to give sort of a 1-year blanket delay of compliance deadline from January 1st, 2026. So basically, folks that are found to be below the standard, as you know, will have until the end of 2025 to make those improvements. We're basically going to delay that until the end of 2026. And so we're going to do that through the draft regulations. There'll be a line item in the rules that says for this first compliance cycle, building owners will essentially have an extra year to meet their energy reduction requirements. And again, we have the authority within the law to do that already, so we're just going to go ahead and offer that. And then depending on how long this health emergency goes on, we will make adjustments to that as appropriate. We are planning, as you all know, we've been working so furiously to get these regs finalized and out. But based on some stakeholder feedback, our thoughts are that we're actually going to wait on putting out the proposed regulations until the end of the summer. The reason for this being that a lot of stakeholders are thinking that basically, folks are focused on reopening their buildings and trying to follow new guidelines that they're being given to reopen their buildings. And so we'd rather have the public comments out at a time where people can actually focus on them and read them and digest them. And so we're planning to postpone putting those out until the end of the summer, and then potentially having a longer public comment period so that building owners and other affected stakeholders have more time to give comments. Then also the other thing that I want to mention is that we are going to be working in partnership with the Sustainable Energy Utility, so the DCSEU, to provide free energy data verification. So as you all know, the law requires that building owners start to get their data third-party verified. We were working really hard to kind of put that requirement into place this year. I think all of you know that. We had talked about it for a while. But due to the current public health emergency, basically we kind of had to put that off, and we are now going to offer this as a compliance assistance program to building owners. We have like a select number of buildings that we're going to offer this verification to. So it's going to be DOE staff and the DCSEU staff, a contractor working under the DCSEU, offering these verifications directly. And we're just going to get through as many as we can over the next several months to make sure that building owners are in a good place before BEPS starts sort of becoming effective. So we want to make sure that, when we're setting this standard, we're setting it on the most accurate data possible, and that we're also helping people get their data in the most accurate place as possible. We're going to send out emails to building owners. I do want to make this announcement too. We're going to start sending out emails to building owners as early as this week to inform them that we will start doing this data verification process over the next couple months. So for anybody on the phone that is a building owner or is in contact with building owners, just a heads up that you might start getting emails from DOE saying, hey, we're launching this program. We need to get a little bit of information from you, like some preliminary information from you. So just a heads up. And then lastly, the other thing we're going to do in the rules is that we're going to offer sort of another compliance pathway in where building owners can actually use a different baseline in terms of establishing the performance pathway baseline. Currently, the way that we're planning to put it in there is there would be another pathway in which building owners could use a combination of calendar year 2018 and 2019 data to set their baseline rather than 19 and 20, because as we know, 2020 is going to be quite an anomaly and may not be sort of reflective of buildings' typical usage, although we don't really know what typical usage means anymore, probably. So I'm going to stop there because I think that there's probably I see a lot of chats coming in. So I'm going to stop there and we can open it up for discussion.
Katie, do we want to go through, because we have those benefits and outcomes on the next two slides, like maybe we could go through those and then come back to this slide to open the discussion? If you
want to do it that way, we can, and we can explain what we see as the benefits. That's sure. That's
fine. Maybe that's,
sure.
I don't know if that would be helpful or not.
Sure. So sort of the way that we see the benefits coming from this is the delay of the implementation of the compliance deadline basically allows building owners to focus their attention on their response to COVID-19. So giving that extra year to allow building owners to have time to actually do what they need to do to recover from COVID-19 or get, whatever that looks like. Building owners and developers will know that the rulemaking process will be slowed down just a bit, not a lot, just a bit. And honestly, to tell you all where we are in the process now, end of the summer is sort of where we're looking anyway. So it's just sort of slowed down from what we originally had thought was going to happen. But due to the public health emergency, our timeline slowed down a bit, as you all know. And then building owners will have the certainty of knowing that the standard, or knowing what the standard is 6 years rather than 5 years before compliance is required. So we're going to set that standard, and then they'll have 6 years to actually comply rather than the 5, just for this first cycle for now. And then also, in putting out the rules and being able to sort of integrate all of our programs together, we'll be able to target financial and technical resources to owners and developers for that 6 years instead of the 5 years. We can start doing this as early as January after we've sort of set the standard, because as you know, we have to set it by January, which means we're going to be setting it before January. So we can start doing that work with everybody as early as January once the standard is set and everyone kind of knows where they fall and knows what needs to be done. And so part of this is that we want to be able to set that certainty, and we want to be able to, have this sort of in place and allow folks to know where they stand, once we set that standard, people will know where they stand and they'll be able to start doing that planning. But then we're going to give them that extra year to have that time to get to where they need to get. And then the data verification assistance will give ownees, again, the certainty that their property is being accurately reported and that they're being accurately assessed under the BEPS standards. So I think that's it, Sharon, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, that was it for the slides. So now if we had a few questions about, there were several comments in the chat about the public comment, because I think as we were talking, we think the end of the summer, as you were talking about, is when the draft rules are going to come out for public comment anyways. So we think that's kind of a done deal, but just because of the way the timelines kind of happened. But having the public comment period open for 60 days instead of 30 days, there were some comments in the chat box, some people saying, some people thought it was great that it was longer, some people thought it was a little bit too much because they thought it might delay the rules not being out by January. So if anybody in the chat box wanted to kind of reflect on that a little bit more out loud, you're welcome to. Or ask a question. Monica, I think you had one, the first comment.
Well, yeah, I mean, the original discussion was to get the draft rules published earlier in the summer. And so, like, the delay of a year for compliance makes a lot of sense given the economic environment we're in. It was already a short turnaround to assess your building, plan for improvements, actually undertake those improvements, get them permitted, do the construction, and then measure improvements and performance. But not having the draft rules out, while people are actually in their budget cycle and can go ahead and plan financially for these improvements, I think is a huge hardship. And that doesn't seem like it's actually targeted at helping owners at all. Like I think they're smart enough to focus on their COVID response if they need to right now, and prioritize that if that's what they need to do, or focus on their budget cycle if that's what they need to do. But deciding that for them, I think, is a disservice to our building ownership community.
Does anyone else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is Marshall. I'll add to that. I think that in principle, a longer comment window is good in and of itself. Gives people more time to think about things, more time to provide comments. You get a wider response of comments, especially people who might not have been aware the day they came out. That said, it's also important, just as Anna said, that getting the rules out sooner helps people be able to decide during this budget cycle, giving people that more time. Getting the rules finalized by the end of the year or very, very early in 2020, 2021 at the worst, is, I think, going to be very important for regulatory certainty, for people understanding what's going on. And if the rules aren't out until the end of summer, let's say beginning of September, and you have a 60-day comment period, that puts you at the beginning of November. With due respect to the DC government, it is impossible that the rules would be done virtually. Maybe, it could happen, but it is highly, highly unlikely that rules, especially rules this complex, could be then done by the end of the year. And we've been working really hard as a task force. A lot of folks have been working on this to try to get this done. So I think I would agree with Annika that I think delaying publication of the rules till the end of summer, coupled with a 60-day comment period, while either might seem good on their own, the combination, I think, does do a disservice to the building community and to the work that's been going on over the past 6 to 8 months. So, but curious to hear what other people think. And I would also say that I think that, just to go back to the first point, this extension of the compliance period to 2027 is, I think, I will say, a great idea and definitely a better solution than pausing the whole program, because since the baseline is going to have to be pre-COVID anyway, pausing the whole program doesn't achieve anything really aside from creating longer term confusion.
Yeah, I'll point out one additional factor with that timeline, as Marshall nicely summarized it. It makes it that much harder for us to meet some of the other aspects of the rule that push us to either declare or take action early in the compliance cycle, right? So in order to hit if we were going to pursue an alternative compliance path and we have to hit a certain deadline to tell DOEE that we're pursuing that path, or we were doing a deep energy retrofit, and there are reasons that we've discussed over the last couple of weeks that has to be done early in the process, that becomes that much more challenging.
Joe or Max or anyone else from commercial building side, you guys have any thoughts?
This is Joe. I guess I'm having a little trouble tracking the conversation, because I thought the way it was explained is that the regulations coming out at the end of the summer was kind of how it was going to happen anyway. So it's maybe this bullet saying that it's been postponed is what's confusing people. So some clarity there would be helpful, because I think we're spending a lot of debate, that like, hey, knowing the regulations earlier would be helpful. But it's but what I heard you say was that that wasn't actually a decision. That's just the way it's been tracking.
So there's two parts of the second bullet. We actually thought we would get the draft rules out for public comment a little bit closer to the beginning of the summer, but then everything got ratcheted back, I think, on the timeline. So I think when we say the end of the summer, it may be beginning of August versus end of August. It all depends on how things happen behind the scenes. But I think, I think August is realistic. We just don't know when in August, whether or not it's beginning or end. And then it's, I think, the 60 days versus the 30 days. So like if we get this out for public comment, let's say at the beginning of August, then they would be open for public comment probably through the beginning of October, meaning there's still some other processes that happen after that. It would put a little bit of a delay of getting them to the final stage of regulations probably after January versus by January. So I think what folks are talking about is they don't love the idea of leaving it open for 60 days versus 30 days.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
Did that help? Okay.
Yeah,
And don't love the idea of end of August as opposed to July or beginning of August, because we were trying to target earlier in the summer. So anything we can do to make that happen would be really helpful for our owners. And it just feels like it's a political move. And I'm sorry, but in 2015 and 16, I worked on the building energy and green codes. In 2016 and 17, those went for legal review and CCCB review. And the 2017 building codes just got published at the end of May of this year in 2020. So I apologize if it sounds like I'm being difficult about this, but I don't want to see this be a 3-year process.
Yeah. Joe, you were going to say something?
I was just, I don't have anything earth-shattering to say. It's, I think 60 days, more people are going to see it, and you're going to get more thoughtful comments. 30 days, less people are going to see it. People are going to have, bandwidth is, super tight right now. People are doing double jobs. So, as a building owner, there's no hotels, right? And like hotels right now are, hundreds of thousands of dollars a day, in losses, right? Just bleeding cash. So hotels haven't got a chance to participate in this conversation. And then, it seems like there's a lot of information here that people are going to need to digest, and on top of trying to get, make sure their businesses don't go out of work, so it's, I think more time makes sense. I'm not trying to slow it down. I understand that getting clarity earlier is helpful for planning, and it would help us get our budgets, get these projects into budgets and stuff if we knew, if we had, the sense of rules ahead of time. So I'm not trying to slow things down, but I do think whatever rationale went into the decision extended from 30 to 60 days from, someone trying to run a business makes a lot of sense. Like our plates are incredible right now.
Noted, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I think that's sort of what we were thinking, and I think I appreciate all the feedback, and I just want you to know that Molly Hofsummer, who's helping us draft the rules from the legal side of things, and Neil Kroll-Rentz, our legislative directors, are on the line right now. So they're hearing all this feedback, and we're taking it in, and we will definitely take it all under advisement. And we know that rulemaking can take time, and we certainly understand that. So we really appreciate all the feedback that you all are giving. So if there's more, keep it coming.
Yeah, and there's some great comments in the chat box that we'll definitely make the notes. So thank you very much. Any other comments that anybody, comments or questions about this, or we'll move on to the next topic and try and let everybody go by 3:30. We'll see.
Can I ask about the data verification? Just to be perfectly clear, if I'm reading this or understand this correctly, there's no active step that any building respondent needs to do to validate their 2019 data. It's only the case whether or not DOEE through DCSEU and their contractor reach out to us and say, we've identified something, we need more info.
Yeah, Matt, so we're going to be proactively reaching out to the buildings that we've identified, but we also would be willing to offer it to folks that want it. So I think if there's buildings that are thinking that they want to offer, they want this, because we're going to be sort of sending it out to our networks to let folks know that this is happening. And so I think if building owners want us to help them verify their data, then we would be willing and open to help with that as well, depending on time and capacity. But yes, right now.
But flipping it the other way, if you're comfortable with if I say I'm comfortable with the data I've submitted, I don't need any help, and and DCSU through DOE doesn't get in touch with us, we don't have to take any step to further validate our 2019 data.
Not this
That's
time.
what I want to clear.
Not at this time.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Mark, you're talking on mute.
I'm sorry. I like Matt's question. Similarly, are you able to speak at all to whether there will be in the future such requirements for third parties or others to conduct data verification, or whether it's possible that this sort of in-house and through the SEU method might be, is this a trial run of what might be in the future, or is this a temporary thing and some sort of more formal, verification process as part of the submission process may still be required in the future?
Right now, this is a temporary thing. So this is something that we're offering because we felt that this is something that we need to prioritize as a staff. So the folks on the building performance and enforcement branch have stepped up to say, we want to be able to help and offer this to building owners. So this is a testament to my staff being like, we think this is important, and we want to be able to do this for this year because we know that this year is important. So right now, this is sort of temporary. And then just a heads up for everyone on the phone, we will be updating our benchmarking regs to include a third-party verification requirement. So the updated benchmarking regs will probably come out also sometime soon. Again, that's a reg update. That's not new regs. So that requirement will probably come into play come in 3 years, Marshall. So in 2022, I believe, is what we wrote in the regs. I can go back and look specifically. So this will be a third-party verification requirement in the future. Whether we continue to use DCSEU or a contractor through DCSEU remains to be seen. I think we're going to have a lot of lessons learned as we move through the next couple of months, and sort of thinking through how or where DCSEU should be involved, or where we should be involved, or a contractor through SEU is something that we're going to think through over the next couple months. And Annika, I see your question about there being a co-education component for owners along with verification. And what I'm thinking you're asking is, are you asking that instead of us just sort of helping them update their data, we're telling them actually what they did wrong and how to fix it and make sure they don't do it in the future?
Yes, because I see so many people enter data incorrectly or just out of not knowing how into Portfolio Manager and helping them actually understand how to do it more accurately in the future.
Yeah,
Not
that's a
just
great
verifying
point.
it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think Joanna is on the line. Joanna Saunders, who's our program manager, who's going to be running all of this. So I'll chat with her about that and sort of how we can incorporate that in. And the other thing I wanted, I've talked to Joanna about is sort of putting in some sort of education component to folks about like in the future, this is how you're like right now we're doing it for you, but in the future you're going to potentially have to hire someone to go do this, so that they know that like this is not potentially a thing that's going to be done every time. So that's a good point taken, and we'll put it in. We'll try to work it into the workflow.
If I can make one more comment about the rulemaking, to the sort of comments that Matt and Joe and others were making about budget cycles and about the need to, say, declare an alternative compliance path or declare the use of the prescriptive path, etc. If it turns out, all comments already having been made, I stand by about the idealness of certain of the timeline of publication or the length of the comment period. If it looks like it's going to really be extending things, and thus the final rules might not be appearing until at some point in 2020, along with extending the compliance, the period of compliance additional year, you might DOE may want to look at extending the window by which you have to declare the use of the prescriptive path, the window by which you need to declare an alternative compliance path, and all of those other sorts of intermediate deadlines that we discussed when we were talking about the draft rulemaking. Maybe all of those should also get another year as well.
Thanks, Marshall. And that's definitely something that we've been thinking through as well. So we've been meeting as a team to really think through the rippling effects of extending the deadline and what that means. So mainly Christian and Andrew have been sort of working on that side of things to really make sure that everything's sort of aligned. And so we'll make sure to do that. And I think we can talk a bit about that too in the next meeting when we talk through some of the outstanding issues with the rules that we were going to bring up with you all.
Before we jump to solar, if I may ask one more point of clarification, I think it was the last bullet on that slide that said I think you presented it as if each building has the option to request their performance baseline be based on 18 and 19. Does that mean you could either select 1819 or 1920 as your performance baseline?
Yeah, so again, taking that step back and looking at what we have the ability to do within our authority of the law, basically the way that the law is written right now, it's very prescriptive about the performance path. And that it says that the baseline shall be based on the 2 years preceding the first compliance cycle, which by definition is 1920. So in order for us to update, we would have to go through a legislative change. So in order to offer the flexibility without having to do a legislative change and do something within our authority, we're going to offer sort of an alternative, one of those other compliance paths offered by DOE that will basically say for this first compliance cycle, building owners can use a combination of 18 and 19. So yes, building owners could choose which one that they want to pursue. But like I said, the reason we're doing that is because it doesn't require us to do a legislative change.
Understood.
Which, as you all know, can get complicated.
Could I ask one more kind of mechanical question like that? With the compliance deadline moving to 2027, would BEPS 2, like the start date of BEPS 2, get bumped back accordingly? Like the whole thing just gets shifted? What were you thinking there with BEPS 2?
Yeah, so right now we're really trying to focus on getting this first cycle right, Joe. And so right now, like I said, we're doing what we can within our authority under the law, without having to make legislative changes. And then as we're moving through this process and we start to pick up those legislative changes that will have to be made, I'll be working closely with Nicole, who I said is on the phone, to really put those forward. But right now we're just trying to respond and give folks what they need right now. and then we'll move through figuring out sort of the logistics for the following cycles as we move through this. And if those require legislative changes, then Nicole and I will work together to get that done. I hope that
Makes
helps
sense.
answer your
Thanks.
question. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on to the next topic? Okay, Katie, you want to talk about solar?
One quick second, I'm going to tell my daughter to turn her tablet down. 1 second. Sorry about that. I didn't want you all to be hearing the Elena of Avalor theme song as I'm trying to talk. I'll just hear it. So with the solar considerations, I think you all were copied on an email that Marshall sent around that had a letter that we received from Flywheel talking about some considerations that they would like for us to make in terms of incorporating solar specifically into BEPS and specifically into BEPS specifically into the performance pathway. And then we've talked about it a few times on the task force calls. We also have had some talks about it internally here at DOE. We've pulled in folks from other divisions in the Energy Administration that specifically work on solar, just to kind of get a good sense of like how this should fit into our program. And so I think that, in talking and then hearing from stakeholders and hearing from you all, I think that in my mind, and we've talked about this with the task force chairs, that it makes sense to kind of take this into a subcommittee. And so that's sort of what I'm just sort of giving an announcement that we've heard all the feedback. We have sort of done analysis on our end that we'd like to sort of present in response to that. And I think that we have sort of a different viewpoint, DOE does, that we'd also like to talk to all the affected stakeholders about. And so we're going to be moving this conversation into a subcommittee. We feel like this is not something that will affect that this is not something that necessarily will affect the rules, because this is something that we could write into sort of the guidance documents that we're going to have about the pathways for BEPS. And so we don't feel like having a subcommittee for this will hold up, sending the rules forward or anything like that. So we do want to engage in this conversation. So we're planning to form a subcommittee, and that's sort of it was more of an announcement. But if anybody has reactions to that, or we want to talk about, I don't know, Sharon, what the best way is for people to sort of sign up for the subcommittee. But yeah, I just want to put that out there and let you all know that.
Yeah, if there's anybody on the line that's interested in the solar subcommittee, if you want to put your name in the chat, then we can follow up and send you an email. And subcommittees are also open for people that are not part of the task force. They're open to the public. So if you want to share the information, if you know anybody that might be interested in that information, then please share that information with me, and we will get something scheduled to make sure that people know about that. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Or
if you're on a phone line and not on Blue Jeans, maybe go ahead and say your name for you, or send us an email afterwards.
Sharon, you'll be hearing from me. I also have heard from two other building owners of different, both office and hotel property types with solar considerations who would like to participate in order to provide sort of some additional case studies or specific examples.
That's
a good point, Matt. I wanted to clarify that you do not have to be a task force member, right, Sharon, to join the subcommittee.
Yep. Anybody can participate in the subcommittee.
Wow. It's basically
we have a lot of interest. I'm glad we'll be doing this by video, so I don't have to book a really big conference room. Just saying.
I do have to note, though, that if we have a quorum of the task force, it actually has to be considered an official meeting. Not to discourage anyone to participate, but just noting that. We'll have to be mindful of that.
I'll look at the names and see later how many people are interested. If it ends up being the majority of this task force, we may end up having. Okay.
Yeah, we were by no means
quorum.
Yeah, we were by no means trying to take this conversation offline or anything. It was more that we knew there was a lot of very vested interests that were kind of going in different directions. And so we just wanted to sort of rein it in and give sort of our viewpoint of it.
Okay, I'll collect. Yeah, for the folks that are on the line, if you have other folks that know, please send me that information. Let me collect all of those names and see how many people we have. And then we will see whether or not this turns into a subcommittee or a full task force meeting, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Okay.
I just wanted to say, for the record, that having spoken up a lot about this issue, that upon further reflection, looking at how the issues that I and others have raised would be dealt with, I actually do think a lot of it relates to things like the definition of normalization of site EUI, or other factors that definitely do fall within the realm of guidance. So I would sort of agree with DOE. While I don't know that I agree with DOE's interpretation on the issue, I agree with the idea that this could be dealt with through guidance, and wanted to state that for the record.
For some of the newer folks that are in the chat box that I don't maybe recognize names, make sure that you signed in with your email to make sure that I have your email. Just saying that. Any other thoughts we need to say out loud about solar before moving on to the next topic? Campus update. Katie?
I'm on a roll here. Okay. Basically, this is another issue that we've been sort of talking and mentioning with you all over the last, how long we've been meeting now? 7 months or so. And so, as you all know, for folks who are on the phone that maybe aren't as familiar, there's a provision in the law that DOE must come up with a sort of separate metric and sort of requirements for campuses, and that includes institutions of higher education and hospitals. And so we've been working on this issue for a while. It's a very complex issue. As you all can imagine, sort of just the configuration and the meter setup on a campus is just very, very different than somebody who owns a commercial office building or a multifamily building in the district. And so the application of BEPS is a little bit more complicated when it comes to campuses. And so we've been sort of throwing this, working on this idea with the consortium a bit. We've mentioned it in task force meetings before, but not really had a chance to kind of dig in on it. So this is another one that we're going to basically go ahead and form a subcommittee on. Sounds like I just love forming subcommittees, basically. So this is another one that we're going to move forward with, kind of trying to come at with sort of all the different interests and bring together and come to a solution on sort of what the campus metrics should look like, and then what should the requirements be of the campuses in order to meet sort of those energy reduction requirements. And so DOE has been thinking about this for a while now. We've been trying to work through this for a while. The consortium has been thinking through this for a while now. And so now we know that there's some folks on the task force that would also potentially like to be involved in those conversations, and maybe folks outside of the task force that want to be involved in those conversations. So we're going to be moving this to a subcommittee as well. And again, we'll be establishing the campus metric through sort of a guidance document. So again, this is not an issue that will hold up the rules. This is something that we can do through a separate guidance document so that the campuses will obviously have time to read and reflect on and be able to follow once sort of once kind of the effective date of BEPS kicks in. So this is another one that if you're interested, please let us know. And then we will coordinate on our end to coordinate these meetings. If there's folks that are wanting to be on both subcommittees, we'll try our best to make sure that they don't overlap. I guess we'll have to make sure they don't overlap, because then our staff would have to be in both at once. But anyway, so that's just another one that I'm putting out there. This is another, I think, great conversation that we're going to have, trying to get at sort of how should BEPS apply to the different campuses in the district.
Yep, so if you are interested in being on the campus subcommittee, you can state it out loud now if you're just on the phone, or if you want to put it in the chat box, and then we can follow up with you later, and we can follow up. And we'll be reaching out to the consortium. Dave, of course, you're going to be on the subcommittee. and follow up with the consortium for other folks that will be on that particular subcommittee. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, we will move on to the next. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Annika. We had a topic came up at the Green Building Advisory Council meeting that she wanted to talk about.
Yes, so our building codes, as I mentioned, were authored in 2015, 2016, approved to go out for public comment in 2017. Apologies. There was considerable delay, I think, in both public comment and publication. So our 2017 building codes predate the Building Energy Performance Standard, and they are not coordinated with BEPS. And so this is just something I wanted to point out. If you wanted to see them, they were published last, I guess, May 29th, and so that's when they officially kick in. So if you are not substantially underway in design, don't have a design contract, don't already have a permit in hand or a pending, permit that you've applied for, these would apply to you. There's a handful of exceptions, but otherwise, if you're a new project getting started, you would be under the new building code. And so this is a link. There's 2 volumes. The second one has the energy code, so I just highlighted that second link is the volume. It's where you can get it right now. The GEX form is coordinated at DCRA, but the guidance document is not yet published. So for right now, this is where you can get the new code. If you'll go to the next slide. We don't yet have, well, here, I'll just start here. We did a Pnl study back in 2017 when the draft code was written. To look at, modeling the code, because we did 90.1 2013 plus Chapter 7 of ASHRAE 189 plus some additional information and additional requirements that DC felt were appropriate to meet our energy goals at that time. So Pnl did energy analysis and said if you follow the DC proposed energy standard, what would you achieve in terms of energy use intensity at site? And so you can see here for an office building, let me close my chat box so I can see it. For an office building, 56.1 kBTU per square foot per year, and for an apartment building or multifamily, 36.6. So that was modeled. It was fairly detailed and consistent with the proposed code at that time. And even when we went through our public comments, there were not so many changes that we felt like this would deviate. Go ahead. And so we don't have our actual BEPS or standard published yet, but we do know what our medians were in 2018. And so just looking at multifamily and commercial office, we know the Energy Star scores that were the medians at that time for DC, so 66 and 69. And so I just did a quick benchmarking exercise using Energy Star Portfolio Manager to say if you met the new code that was just published, would you hit the DC median Energy Star score for those 2 building types? Go ahead. So for multifamily, the DC BEPS, our building energy performance standard based on the 2018 data was a 66, and in multifamily, if you hit that site EUI of 36.6, your Energy Star score would be 78. You'd be good to go. If you meet the new energy code, you would exceed the local DC median Energy Star score, no problem. So assuming that the median Energy Star score doesn't change dramatically year over year, you're probably fine. You go ahead to the next slide. Unfortunately, when we get to commercial office, that's not the case. So when I plugged in a commercial office building using the minimum energy code data and the 56.1 site EUI, if we didn't do any better than code and just followed the code, I do come in a little bit under the median Energy Star score from the 2018 data. So I think it's really important for anyone who's engaging in any kind of public education or outreach to make sure that it's understood that our recently published energy codes predate BEPS and are not coordinated with BEPS. And people should be benchmarking against the Building Energy Performance Standard and not just the energy code. There should not be an assumption that the energy code will put you out ahead of the standard, and it certainly wouldn't put you out ahead of it for multiple cycles. And so it's an unfortunate thing that the code was published 3 years after it was ready to be published, but that's where we are right now. So this is just something that came up at our last GBAC meeting, and I wanted to make sure that we're coordinating between the BEPS Task Force and the GBAC and that everyone is aware of this, particularly building owners who might be engaging in new building design and seeking permits. I think it's important to note. Are there any questions on that?
This is Kate Johnson. I just want to add a couple more points there. Thank you for raising this and for doing the analysis. I think the most important caveat I would make is that with the codes, they are design-based at this point. So irregardless of what the code could get you in terms of Energy Star score, it's, BEPS is still a performance standard. So we all know that there are lots of buildings that don't perform as well as they are designed. Annika, I think you know that better than anyone. And then the other thing I want to note is that while, what Annika looked at was the codes themselves, there is a new alternative compliance pathway called Appendix Z that you can follow instead of following the energy code, which is essentially a net zero energy code language. And so for building owners that ask, what should I do if I'm building something new and I want to make sure I don't have to worry about BEPS for, a few cycles, our advice will be to folks to look at that Appendix Z. There are other alternative compliance pathways as well that target net zero energy. And so while the codes themselves, as Annika said, were written a long time ago at this point, my hope is that at least Appendix Z can be a resource to projects who really do want to get out ahead and not have to worry about that for a while. And we're working with DCRA to make sure that we can spread the word about the codes, including Appendix Z. And so if folks are interested in learning more, let any of the DOE staff know.
Hey, Annika, if I want to reference this study, is that just like a study that you did, or is this a study that could be shared, that I want to get it in front of all my development people, make sure they know?
It's, Andrew put a link to it. It is a Pnl study. Sorry, Kate, it is Pnl. I just double checked. So sorry.
Oh, no, Andrew put in a different study that was LBNL. We've worked with both of them. We love all of our national labs.
So the one I was taking a look at was Pnl, and he put a link in the chat box, so you can get it there. It's available. Anyone can download it, and so it does. They just looked at those two building types. They did not do every building type under the sun. So LBNL did do a BEPS analysis as well, and if you have a link to the BEPS analysis from LBNL, that was that the second link you have there.
Yes.
So there's a link to both of those. So yeah, I would take a look at those. And, again, I think Kate's point was really good. It doesn't matter if you met the code and you got a permit that said you met the code. All of this is about building performance at the end of the day anyway. And hopefully no one's designing a code minimum building. Anyway, hopefully everyone's designing better than code. But it's also probably worth noting that LEED v4, which is still the current version of LEED, is still synchronized with the older version of ASHRAE as well. LEED v4.1 is synchronized with ASHRAE 90.1 2016, which is a little bit out ahead of this code. So if that doesn't encourage you to look at LEED v4.1 so that you are closer to BEPS, then I don't know what would. Also, yes, Kate mentioned the Appendix Z. There's the net zero, there's the passive house compliance path, there's the energy pedal from ILFI. So there's a lot of different energy standards that you could use as alternative compliance paths to the energy code.
And I would just add one more piece to that, which is that for affordable housing projects that are subject to the Green Building Act, Enterprise Green Communities requires Energy Star certification, which is a 75. Right. So again, if your project is meeting the Green Building Act, and Michael is trying to dig into this in more detail to really understand, where that will get you in terms of potential BEPS compliance. So that's something we're looking at too.
And to answer Joe's question, Annika, please correct me. My understanding is, I apologize for bringing up the C40 Pnl study and confusing everything. What you've done here basically is taken, if I understand correctly, you took the the projected EUIs from the Pnl code for a code-compliant building under the new DC code. You put that in as a design standard. Portfolio manager, you can benchmark an existing building, but you can also benchmark a building as designed, which is sort of effectively what used to be called Target Finder. If that's
Still called Target Finder.
it is still,
Still called Target Finder.
Not with,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. And so she basically put this in Target Finder, and you got it, what the Energy Star would be according to Target Finder if the building met the code and did all the basic, complied with all the basic default assumptions for occupancy, density, and all.
Yes, because I don't have a designed building. So I took, in the case of commercial office, I just picked a 150,000 square foot, commercial office building. In the case of multifamily, I picked a 300,000 square foot multifamily because both represent situations I'm working in right now in the district. And so yes, with Target Finder, you put your design, anticipated energy consumption into Target Finder. If you know your conditions, like how many people and computers and hours of occupancy, you can put that in. Otherwise, you can use defaults. Once you're into Portfolio Manager with an existing building, you should use exact data. But in Target Finder, you can use defaults when you don't have precise data because it's a design condition. So Target Finder just predicts an Energy Star score. It's not meant to be a certainty. It's just meant to get you an idea what your Energy Star score might be based on anticipated energy consumption. So I used that Pnl study and basically plugged in that anticipated energy, site energy use intensity data times the building area essentially and the defaults and got an Energy Star score. I didn't mess around with mixed use or retail because once you start in Target Finder adding additional uses, it won't give you an Energy Star score. So you have to keep it fairly simple. You can be much more nuanced once you're in Portfolio Manager and you have a lot of different use types to break out. So yeah, this doesn't mean to say when you have an actual building that you've built that you can't meet, with brand new building, can't meet the Energy Star rating or the BEPS, but just hopefully, particularly if you're under the Green Building Act and you're doing a LEED certification or green communities, hopefully you're targeting a much higher level of energy performance than the code minimum, but something to just note, particularly on the commercial office side, it is not coordinated with our code because our code was written 3 years ago. And so it predates the idea of this building performance standard. And of course, we wanted the standard to be out ahead of this code. And so when we are getting to the next code cycle, we can better coordinate these things so that they're hand in hand. But just help communicate that if you are doing any kind of public education or engagement, that people really need to focus on where do they want to be, not just in the current cycle, but in future cycles of BEPS. What's the right Energy Star score to target?
Thank you, Annika.
Yeah.
I want to be conscious of time because we told everybody we'd get out early today. Anybody have some final thoughts or questions for Annika? Okay, we'll make sure that all of the links that are in the chat box and all of the conversation we had are in the notes, so everybody can find these studies and look at it in more detail. So we'll make sure we write them all down. Our next meeting is June 23rd. Right now on the agenda is we're going to follow up with some items that we needed to follow up on the draft rules. From the May 12th meeting, things that we needed to come back to you on and give you some feedback. So that's what we're planning on doing on the 23rd. And probably some subcommittee report outs if we have a chance to have any subcommittee meetings in between now and then. We'll just see how timing works out and scheduling with our groups. Any announcements? Does anyone have any announcements? No announcements. Everybody wants to leave.
It is a pretty beautiful day outside.
It is a beautiful day. And we had almost a 1-hour meeting. We did pretty good today. Okay, then we'll go ahead and call this meeting closed. Please email me if you're interested in any of the subcommittees if you didn't have a chance to write in the chat box or know of somebody else. Please email me and give me the information. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and I also gave out a lot of information today too, so if anybody wants clarification, you can contact me directly.
Yep, that was Katie.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Bye.